The scent of dried hyssop and crushed malva hangs heavy in the rafters of the stone-walled cottage, a thick, verdant ghost that clings to the damp wool of blankets and the cool surface of the hearth. Here, in the dim pulse of a dying fire, a woman's hands move with the rhythmic certainty of a prayer. They are stained a deep, indelible green, the juice of crushed stalks etched into the calluses of her palms like a map of the forest floor. She presses a cool poultice against a fevered brow, and for a moment, the jagged breathing of the sick breaks into a sigh. This is the medicine of the shadows, a quiet dialogue between the soil and the suffering that has sustained the village since the first stones were laid. For generations, the language of the earth was spoken in whispers. It was the silver bark of the willow, stripped in the rains of April to quiet the throb of an aching limb. It was the bitter, gnarled root of the marsh, unearthed in the dark of the moon to steady a fluttering heart. This was the medicine of the commons, a sacred pact written in the dirt and the seasons, passed from mother to daughter like a secret heirloom. There was no ledger here, no weight of silver required to unlock the mercy of the fields. To be sick was to be part of the community's shared burden. To heal was a duty as natural as the harvest. But beyond the mist-shrouded tree line, a new sound begins to drown out the rustle of the herbs. It is the cold, rhythmic turn of heavy iron keys in the locks of the new university clinics, stony, silent halls where the sun never touches the floor. Slowly, the wisdom of the hedgerow is being gathered and bound in vellum, hidden behind a wall of impenetrable Latin and the sharp clink of coin. The forest is being silenced, and the cottage hearth is growing cold. As the woman looks toward the rising spires of the city, she feels a sudden sharp chill, the realization that the earth's own marrow is being stolen, fenced off by men who see not a patient to be comforted, but a prophet to be weighed. The gates are closing, and the price of mercy is about to become a debt that many will never be able to pay. A heavy mist clings to the monastery garden, a thick white shroud that muffles the distant tolling of the matins bell. Here the world is reduced to the rhythmic thud-thud of a stone pestle against a marble mortar, a steady heartbeat echoing through the cloisters. Each strike is a prayer, each turn of the wrist a plea for the suffering. The air is sharp with the scent of crushed borage and the earthy damp of turned soil, where the monk moves with ghost-like stillness among the rows of the physic garden. This is a living library of mercy, a sanctuary where the broken and the penniless come to seek the grace of the earth. Here, healing is not a transaction, but a tithe paid in sweat, prayer, and botanical stewardship, a sacred bridge between the Creator's bounty and the creature's pain. But beneath the stillness of the abbey, the world is shifting with the cold finality of iron. In the distant halls of the capital, the king's heavy signet ring presses into pools of boiling red wax, sealing the charters of the new apothecary guilds. It is a quiet sound, the soft squelch of wax, yet it carries the weight of a thunderclap for those who have nothing. The transition moving through the kingdom is not one of chemistry or superior knowledge. It is a brutal redistribution of ownership. The wild meadow, once the pharmacy of the poor, is being fenced by invisible shadows of law and exclusivity. The monk's hands, once seen as instruments of divine charity, are now viewed by the crown as unregulated competition. The free grace of the garden begins to wither, not from a lack of rain, but from the encroaching frost of the ledger. As the monks look out over their stone walls, they see the first toll gates rising on the roads to the city, checkpoints where the sick are sorted by the weight of their purses. The act of healing is being stripped of its holiness, draped in the robes of a merchant, and transformed into a measured commodity. As the sun struggles to pierce the monastery fog, a new question hangs in the air.
heavy and suffocating. When the mercy of the garden is sold to the highest bidder, what becomes of the soul who has only a prayer to offer in exchange for his life?
The flickering candlelight of a cramped scriptorium casts long skeletal shadows against the vellum, where the steady hand of a clerk moves with a chilling, mechanical precision. There is no prayer in this room, only the relentless, rhythmic scratching of a quill against parchment, the sound of a world being redesigned by the stroke of a pen. With every loop of ink, the clerk formalizes the first licenses of the guild, erecting invisible barriers of law around the very act of survival. Each finished scroll is a new boundary, a legal fortress that declares who may touch the dying and who must remain in the dark. Outside, beneath a bruised purple twilight, the village midwife moves through the brambles with a wicker basket cradled against her hip. Her fingers, stained with the juice of elderberries and the dust of the road, possess a wisdom that has outlived empires. She knows the weight of a fever and the specific silence of a lung that is beginning to fail. She works in the tall grass, unaware that as the ink dries in the scriptorium, her touch is being rebranded as a crime. The songs of herbal lore she hums to the restless, the melodies that once carried the memory of healing through 1,000 years of winter, are being replaced by a much sharper, thinner sound. It is the clink of groats falling into a physician's heavy leather purse in the city square. The shift is felt in the growing silence of the town commons. It is the arrival of an era where the human body is no longer a temple to be tended with reverence, but a territory to be managed and taxed. The communal warmth of the hearth fire remedy, shared freely among neighbors in the biting cold, begins to fade. In its place rises the frost of the ledger, a cold, urban logic that demands a fee for every breath saved. As the midwife looks up from her harvest to see the first torches of the guild inspectors flickering on the horizon, she realizes that the marketplace has finally come for the soul. The earth's mercy has been captured, and soon even the noble's gilded chamber will feel the chill of a medicine that values the coin more than the life it was meant to sustain. Frost patterns bloom like intricate lace across the leaded glass of a nobleman's chamber, shielding the interior from the honest, biting cold of the winter street. Inside, the air is cloying, thick with the scent of expensive resins and the metallic tang of a cooling brazier. A doctor, draped in heavy midnight blue velvet that swallows the light, holds a shimmering glass vial up to the guttering candle. He does not look at the patient, whose shallow, rattled breaths are the only sound in the room.
The soil's secrets are in
His gaze
these.
is fixed instead
I will tend them
on the
well.
delicate
Guard them
brass
from prying
scales
eyes.
on the sideboard,
The steam
watching the
rises. Can you feel
slow,
its warmth?
agonizing
Aye,
tilt of
carries
the
the old
balance
power.
as
Together
gold
we draw it
coins are
forth.
piled high. The pallor of the dying man is merely the backdrop for a more vital calculation, the precise value of a life when weighed against the guild's new tariff. This is the birth of the professional veil, a heavy velvet curtain drawn between the suffering and the cure. For centuries, the secrets of the earth were a common heritage, shared in the open air of the marketplace, or whispered over the steam of a shared pot. But now those ancient scrolls are being gathered like spoils of war. They are bound in stiff, expensive leather and locked behind the iron-bound doors of private libraries, accessible only to those who speak the language of the academy and possess the keys of the treasury. Knowledge that once belonged to the wind and the soil is being privatized, codified into mysterious, expensive tinctures that the common man can neither name nor afford. The poppy and the mandrake, once the companions of the weary traveler, have been transformed into regulated substances, their healing properties hidden behind a paywall of Latin script.
Down in the mud-slicked alleys, the poor are left to watch the flight of birds, searching for omens in a world that has suddenly become illegible. They stand at the periphery of the city, looking toward the spires of the university, wondering at what moment the earth's own marrow became a luxury. The medicine of their ancestors is being stolen, rebranded as a dangerous superstition, leaving them with nothing but the silence of the woods. But as the physician closes his leather-bound ledger with a satisfied thud, a different kind of sound begins to rise from the shadows. The sound of an inspector's heavy boot on a wooden door, and the first flickering torches of a hunt that will change the face of the village forever. The hollow metallic echo of a heavy oak door bolting shut rings out through the narrow mud-slicked alleys of the Weavers' District, a sound that strikes deeper than any church bell. It is the signal of a new arrival, the authorized inspector, his boots crunching over frozen refuse with the cold weight of the law. In his gloved hand, he carries a scroll stiff as king's wax, a document that effectively poisons the air of the
These teas are
cottage.
forbidden!
It
No,
forbids
why
the
only
brewing
solace?
of
The law
old
demands
wives'
it.
teas
Cruelty.
and the steeping of common herbs, stripping the ancestral knowledge of the hearth and rebranding it as a dangerous, illicit superstition. This is not merely a change in policy. It is the beginning of a slow, methodical exile of the intuitive, a war declared on the memories of grandmothers. The atmospheric shift is stifling. Where once the air smelled of wood smoke and dried lavender, it is now overtaken by the pungent, chemical burn of boiling vinegar and the sharp, metallic tang of iron filings. These are the scents of the new sterile workshops of the chartered chemists, men who have replaced the soft touch of the midwife with the rigid geometry of the scale. Beneath the noble guise of standardization and safety, a vibrant tapestry of regional folk healing, woven over 1,000 years of shared survival, is being unraveled thread by thread. Every local remedy for a cough, every poultice for a broken bone, is pulled apart until the fabric of community self-reliance is nothing but a pile of discarded lint. What remains is a single, unbreakable golden thread, the thread of the merchant. It is a leash that ties the sick to the shopkeeper's whim, ensuring that the path to recovery must always pass through a licensed counter. As the inspector's shadow lengthens across the doorway of the last independent healer, the village square grows quiet, the old songs of the field replaced by the scratching of ledgers. But as the hearth fires are extinguished by decree, a darker cold begins to seep into the bones of the people, a realization that while the new medicine is being measured and weighed with clinical precision, the cost of a human life is being calculated in a currency that most will never possess. The tolling of a distant rusted bell suggests that for some, the price of this progress has already been paid in blood.
A rusted bell tolls through the gray drizzle of a Tuesday morning, its iron tongue sounding a hollow, mournful note for the funeral of a pauper. He is carried on a rough pine plank, a man who slipped away with the sharp, lingering scent of wild garlic still on his breath, the only medicine he could afford from the hedgerow before the laws turned the forest into a trespass. He died not for lack of a cure, but for lack of a license. The authorized mercurial salts, housed in their blue-glazed apothecary jars, remained sitting on a mahogany shelf just 3 streets away, priced at a sum that represented a year of his labor. His death is not a failure of the human heart to heal, but a quiet, clinical triumph of the ledger. In the grand vaulted halls of the royal courts, where the air is sweetened by expensive ambergris, the ancient rituals of the village green are being systematically dismantled. The learned men in their fur-trimmed robes mock the midwife's poultice as rustic ignorance, laughing over wine at the superstitions of those who look to the moon and the soil. This mockery is the herald of a new, centralized order, a world where every drop of holy oil, every ounce of sulfur, and every grain of medicinal powder must carry the heavy stamp of a royal tax. The kingdom is no longer a collection of souls bound by mutual aid. It is a marketplace of biological necessity. The sacred bond between the healer and the healed, a bond once forged in the heat of a shared hearth and a common struggle, has been severed by a cold, sharp blade of commerce. It has been replaced by a transaction as sterile as a stone floor, one that values the glitter of the coin falling into a tray over the steady, desperate pulse of the living. As the pauper is lowered into the wet earth, the village elders watch from the shadows, their hands empty and their traditional songs silenced by the fear of the inspector. The old world is being buried with him, and as the mourners turn away, they see the rising smoke of the city hospitals on the horizon, not as beacons of hope, but as the chimneys of a new and hungry industry.